Shavua Tov u'Mevarach for the 21st of Av. Mishnah Yomi continues in chapter 5 of Bava Kama. Mishnah Hey, a hofer bor b'shut yachid. Someone's digging a hole in his private property. That's so far so good. He has permission to do so. Uftaho l'shut harabim. But then he makes an opening into this digging in the public area. Oh, b'shut harabim, he's actually digging. The hole is under the Reshut Rabim, Uftahu Reshut Yachid, and the opening is in the private property, but then later he allows people onto his private property. He allows the Rabim, he allows people to walk through that area where the opening is. Or Reshut Yachid, it's in private property, Uftahu Reshut Yachid Achir, but he actually makes an opening into his cave or his hole into a different property where other people have permission to be. Chayiv. In all of these cases, he has to pay for anyone or any animal that falls into this hole and gets hurt. The idea being he has an opening into his excavation in an area where other people have permission to be. If the entire thing is located on private property, yes, you can have a well in your backyard. Now, you might need a fence around that to keep the kids out, but it's your private property. If someone falls in the well, you can say, well, what were you doing trespassing on my property, as we've talked about in the past few days, the past couple days in this chapter. Mishnah goes on, Hover bor b'shut rabim, someone's digging in the public area, v'nafal l'tocho shor o chamor v'met, chayev. And an ox or a donkey falls in the hole, really any animal that falls in this hole and dies due to the injury, the person who dug the hole is chayev. He's considered the owner, quote-unquote owner, of this excavation project, even though really it's in the public area, and he really doesn't own it. He doesn't really own the ground, but he dug the hole. He is liable for the damage. Echad hofer bor, whether he's digging a regular bore, a circular normal pit, or it's a siach, is a ditch, is like a long rectangular pit. Marav is a cave, but really it means it's a pit, and then they kind of put a roof over it with a little opening, so it's kind of like a cave. Or haritzin is a square pit. Nitzin is a wedge pit. It's wider on the top and gets narrower at the bottom. Chayev, he has to pay the damage no matter what shape his excavation project was. Imken lamanem are bor. So the Mishnah asks, so then why does it say bor? A regular circular pit. A bor, b'shut rabim, is what the Torah talks about in Shemot chapter 21. Ma bor sheyesh bo kedei lahamit asara tefachim. That's to teach us that the bore we're talking about is a bore that can cause death, one that is 10 tefachim deep, that's deep enough to kill an animal that falls into the pit. Now, in the Gemara, they talk about, well, if it's falling in head first, and, there's stale air at the bottom of the pit, so that might also be contributing. It might be maybe even greater than 10 tefachim, it's falling in head first and not, kind of rolling in. So they talk about the mechanics of how a bore that's 10 tefachim deep, which is not terribly deep, but it could theoretically and practically cause death to an animal. So the Mishnah says that really the pasuk is comparing just like a bore, a regular pit, if it's 10 tefachim deep, can cause death. Af kol, so to all, sheyesh bo kedei lahamit asara tefachim. So all of these other excavations, we say if they're 10 tefachim or deeper, we assess them as being able to cause death, even if they were a different shape. Hayu pechutim asara tefachim, if they were less than 10 tefachim deep, the nafal shor or chamor, and an ox or donkey falls in. Really, it could be any animal, but because the verse of the Torah itself uses the words shor and chamor, they use that in the Mishnah too. If someone else's animal falls in, met, and they die, they die even though it was a more shallow pit than 10 tefachim, putter. The digger doesn't pay for the death of the animal because that's not normal for an animal to die from a fall that's only 9 tefachim deep. That's not usually enough to kill a person. It's considered onus, considered an unavoidable mishap. But if the animal falls into the 9.5 tefach pit and is injured, breaks a leg, chayav, then the digger, of course, would pay for the injury. That is normal for animals to be injured from such a fall, even if it wouldn't normally cause death. Now on to Mishnah 6, Mishnah Vav, bor shel shnei shutfin, a bore that belongs to two partners. Now they might have owned a shared courtyard in this place, and they share a well. Avar lav rishon v'lo, the first one walks by, and he doesn't cover the well. Hasheni lo kisahu, the second guy comes along, and he also doesn't cover the well. Hasheni chayev, The second guy is the one who has to pay if someone falls into the well. Now, in the Gemara, they explain this is a case where the first guy gave the dli, either means the cover to the well. He gave it to the second guy. He said, basically, here, you take over, or the dli, meaning the bucket, that they're using this to draw water. And the first guy's done, the first partner's done drawing water, and he gives the bucket to the second guy. And basically, he's saying, you take over. And then the second guy doesn't put the lid on or cover it up or make it safe again. So that's why the second guy is the only one on the hook. Mishnah adds a similar case, Kisahu Rishon. The first partner was done using it. He covered it up correctly. Uvasheni Mitzah Megula. The second guy walks by and he sees that it happened to get uncovered somehow. Velo Kisahu, and he does not cover it. Hasheni Chayav. The second partner is Chayav. He should have covered it up when he saw so. Kisahu Karawi. If they covered it up appropriately, whether it had one owner or two, Nafal L'Tocho Shor Chamor Met. Potter. An animal fell into this hole, it's 10 tefachim deep, but because they covered it up, they took the proper normal precautions, and then something out of the ordinary happened, something they didn't know about happened to expose the pit and the damage, and that's when the animal fell in and died. They didn't know to fix it and cover it. Potter. They do not pay. Now the Mishnah brings the corollary, lo kisah geroi, they didn't cover it appropriately, they covered it in some way that was a bit negligent or not strong enough. V'nafal l'tocha shor o chamor met, someone else's animal came, fell in and died. Chayev was 10 tefachim, it was a possible source of damage, they have to pay for it, or the owner of the excavation must pay for the animal. Nafal lefonav mikola kriya. Now here it's a little different. It's something we call grumma, causation. The animal falls forward, mikola kriya, from the sound of the jackhammer or the shovel that's being used in the pit below for excavation. Chayev. So it's fallen into the pit, which causes it to die. So the people down there doing the excavation, making the pit, they have to pay. La'acharav mikola kriya, potter. If the animal gets startled from the noise and it trips and falls backwards, or it jumps backwards, not into the pits, and it breaks a leg or something, they do not have to pay for that. It's grumma, it's causation. Their noise, it's normal for people digging in a pit to make noise, and you can't always expect an animal to get startled and injured. Now, if the animal falls in the pit while they're digging and they didn't have it fenced off, then they would pay. Now, the Mishnah brings a really important teaching about the scope of liability of the excavators. Nafal l'tocho shor ve'kelav. Now, a ox fell in with kalim on it, with something on the back. You understand, a harness, a leash, whatever it is, a plow attached. V'nishdabru, and those kalim broke. Or chamor ve'kelav, a donkey falls in with its saddlebags and whatever. V'nitzkaru, they were ripped. The things on the donkey were ripped. Chayav ola behema, whatever injury was caused to the animal itself, they have to pay. Whoever owns the excavation must pay for it. Upater ala kalim. They do not pay for the utensils, the kalim, the saddlebags, the things attached to the animal at the time. And the Bartanura here cites from the Gemara, it's over there in Shemot chapter 21 again. Nafal shama shor o chamor. It says they fell in there, a shor v'chamor, an ox or donkey, meaning an animal generally. Shor v'lo adam, chamor v'lo kalim. So the owner of an excavation is responsible for animals falling in. That's what the Torah is intending to teach us, not for people or kalim. Finally, the Mishnah notes, Nafal l'tocho shor cherish shotev v'katan chayav. If an ox, which is a cherish, now literally that's deaf mute, that usually refers to a person who can't communicate. It's like it's an ox, an animal that's deaf. Or shota, it's a little bit of an imbecile, it's not mentally competent, it's not fully aware of its surroundings. V'katan, now, a katan doesn't mean an animal before it's bar mitzvah or bark mitzvah for a dog. Of course, it means an animal that's not yet old enough to be trained to pull a plow and do normal animal things that you do on a farm. Chayav. So these animals don't really look where they're going. So if somebody digs a pit and, even if it's a pit that would be obvious to most animals, to a shor pikeach, a normal animal would see this pit coming and would avoid it. But so then it would be onus if such an animal falls into an obvious pit. But even in obvious pits, animals that are not really likely to look where they're going, or they're not old enough and mature enough, they would still be chayav. Whoever dug this pit, even if it's obvious, would still be chayav on these animals. Ben obat, if it's a young boy or girl, a human being, eved o ama, or an eved kenani, or shivcha kenanit, potter. The owner does not pay for them because human beings, even human beings who are young and possibly immature, are expected to be looking for pits as they walk along. And really, as we indicated, the pasuk says shor v'chamor. The Torah itself is saying the liability for the digger of the pit extends only to animal injuries and not people who really logically should be looking where they're going. Yashar koach and tizku l'mitzvot.